Evening. Welcome everyone. I see in the chat we've got Hariel, Lolo. We've got Corin, Jeannie, Alon, Villainous, Dan Simpson from Prescott, Arizona. Jeannie's from Israel. And we've got Mike Simao. Welcome, Sergeant Grinch, and Lilo Maine. And yeah, thanks all for being here on this very cold Sunday in Warsaw, Poland. Yeah, it's something like supposed to be minus 11, which I have no idea what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's, I don't know, probably like 20 degrees Fahrenheit or something, or could be 6 feet 3 inches in Fahrenheit. So hey, you tell me. All right, guys. So thanks all for being here today. Unfortunately, Mal is not well. He's got a bad cold. I still have my cold, but yeah, it was a little bit too late. Hello, Dr. Jonathan Gemmell. Welcome from New Zealand. Yeah, but it was a little too late for me to either switch to a different topic or to change, but, you know, or to whatever, reschedule. So, yeah, we'll go ahead, and then Mal will join me later this week. So, Tom Yoka, welcome, Mr. Rock from Croatia. Hello there. Okay, yeah, so let us dive in. Today we're talking about Pius X. So Elisa, welcome from Chile. Awesome, fantastic. Love to go to South America one day, to Chile for sure. Argentina, Chile, places like that. Definitely Peru. Sunny Sydney. And you have a cold too. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, wrong time. Yeah, I had a cold for New Year's Eve. So Michael Ola, welcome. Yeah. So this issue of modernism does not affect only the Catholic Church. I need you to be very clear on that. This is a wide-ranging issue. It affects academia, it affects government, it affects industry. So from business to schools to churches, this is everywhere. But it was something that was being dealt with actively by the Catholic Church, and not only just by Pius X. Pius IX was dealing with it. Pius XI was dealing with it. So, and they had various levels of success, shall we say. But of course, Pius X, some do call him the hammer of heresies. So let's look at this. This is not just a Catholic problem. This is a wide-ranging problem. And while it has affected the Catholic Church, it is almost certainly deeply embedded in the foundation of the Protestant Church. Liberal cesspool of Seattle. Tim McDonough. Seattle's a beautiful city. I've been there twice. It's a gorgeous place. Been to Pike Place, obviously. I flew to Canada, and I think once we took a ferry from Canada back. It was gorgeous, but yeah, it's sad to see it fall apart. Yeah. So this is Pius X defending reason from modernism and Protestant liberalism. This is not an exaggeration. It is a serious problem within Protestantism, and I will go into detail. I have more than just this presentation on it. I will be doing a specific presentation on nominalism, which is going to be very, very important. So, yeah, I want to meet modernists with snowflakes. I want to meet them with fists. Did he actually say that? If you can find me that quote, Michael, that'd be really interesting. Okay, let's continue. So, how did we get here? Right? That's a very important question. How did we get here? And this is where ideas have consequences, or shall we say, philosophy has consequences. So, do you remember how they said the Bible is fake, and now even the kids are gay? Wow, he actually said that. So, yeah, so I guess the lesson what we learn from this is that don't let people tell you the Bible is fake. Don't let people tell you that biblical morality is fake. Right? We need to defend the biblical morality we all grew up with, the Ten Commandments. Right. So, well, the they say that, Pedro. You definitely know that the they say that. Right. Yeah. And of course, remember, after they said that the Bible is fake, we also started to get vegan cats. So really, if you don't like vegan cats and you think they're unnatural, then you definitely need to start defending biblical morality. Very simple. Because vegan cats are just unnatural. Ernesto, welcome. So Pius X says in E Supremi, which is an encyclical, how many there are who mimic Christ and abhor the church and the gospel more through ignorance than through badness of mind. of whom it may well be said, they blaspheme whatever things they know not. And that's in Jude 1 verse 10. The full verse is, but these speak evil, or blasphemio, of whatever they do not know, and whatever they know naturally, like brute beasts, in these things they corrupt themselves. I guess we can say that this is a rephrasing of a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Now, I will be peppering this talk with your cats are meat eaters. Well, you sounds like you have normal cats. Villainous says, yes, homosexuality has become a virus. I think the rate's around 20% of young people have chosen not to be heterosexual. It's a mind virus. Gary Gisclair, welcome. Good to see you. So it is a mind virus, and it is because we are currently detached from Western morality, Western culture. And when we say Western culture, we mean Christian culture. And when you say Christian culture, historically, we mean Catholic culture. Because while this is not a talk that is specifically geared to this topic, in the next couple of talks, Mr. Martin Luther is going to get a beating. Not specifically in the one I'll do tomorrow, but in the follow-up, Martin Luther is going to have to take a lot of responsibility for this. We're going to be looking at how he introduced this particular mind virus and introduced it, unfortunately, into Christian doctrine. All right. So my people suffer from lack of knowledge. Fantastic, Pedro. Yeah, very well said. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. So I will be peppering this talk with a little bit of these Catholic quotes so you can get an understanding. And you can, once you read them and hear them, you can ask yourself if these are pagan quotes, as we are constantly told the Catholic Church is, or if these are Orthodox Christian quotes and quite reasonable. So there are lots of people who blaspheme what they know not. And these would be people who blaspheme against the Catholic Church, for instance, or people who, well, let's see if you can apply context for this yourself. But think of this, the ignorant are dangerous too, even if they don't necessarily believe they are. Pius X made numerous warnings, and he wrote extensively on the heresies that were going to destroy the Christian faith, not just the Catholic faith, but the Christian faith as a whole. Brian Collins, welcome. Thank you. Thank you. He says, I finally made it to a live stream and my work's impeccable. Thanks, guys. If you like what I do, please make jihad on the... Oh, wow. My gosh. Wow. Thank you. That is... Wow. I'm really humbled. Thank you. Tim, thank you for your voice in the wilderness. Thank you very much. I'm only about 9 minutes in. 9 minutes late. What did I miss? Not a huge amount. You can always go back to the beginning, play at like 1.75, and you should be good. Hello, Lloyd from Sam. Welcome. Robert Ungurano. How do you spell that? Salaricino is very welcome. Okay, so he wrote numerous warnings, warning about what this was going to do to the church as a whole on an international level. So he wrote several critical documents, one of which is Pascendi Dominici Gregis, or On the Doctrine of the Modernists. He published this in 1907. So the syllabus of Pius X is another document which condemned 65 propositions that represented the chief tenets of modernism. So this is a second document, right? The syllabus of Pius X. I've read it. It's actually a short document. You're welcome to download it. If I recall, I may have linked some of these in the description. If not, I will do so. So this was a supplement to Pascendi, and it was an oath against, and also he wrote another document called An Oath Against Modernism, which this drew primarily from the writings of a guy called Loisy. I think that's how you pronounce it, from Czechia. Welcome, Teresa, who was a modernist in France. So he read their writings, he assessed what it was they believed, and then he started to write, these are things we do not accept. As a Catholic and as a Christian, you cannot accept these things. So he condemned modernist doctrine on ecclesiastical decisions, on Holy Writ, on religious philosophy, Christology, origin of the sacraments, and evolution of church constitution and church doctrine. Right? So as you go through this, try and see how these modernist ideas apply to your church. What would happen to your church if these ideas took hold? So he stressed the importance of preventing individuals with these beliefs from holding positions of authority in seminaries and in Catholic universities. He called for them to be removed, to be fired, to be thrown out the door. So he denounced the belief that the church lacks stability and that the church can change, right? So he referred to Pius IX, who condemned the idea that divine revelation continuously and indefinitely progresses. Small typo there. Very briefly, I will explain some of this, but what these people, well, this idea will be explained briefly. What they're saying is that morals change as time goes on. In other words, what was moralistic in Arabia in the 7th century, when it was okay to have, conjugations with a 9-year-old girl, it's not fine for today because times have changed. He was talking about moral relativism. He was saying, no, church morals do not change. What God stated biblically as this is what is moral, this is what is right, did not change. We have objective moral laws. Pope Pius X emphasized that the sacred dogmas must never be forsaken in favor of what he called a deeper understanding of the truth, meaning a Gnostic view of the truth. Oh, do you have the secret knowledge? Do you know what it really means? Do you know there's a hidden, deeper meaning of this? Tear down and reinvent. Exactly, reinterpret. Right. Yes, villainous. So he wrote another document called, and then St. Anselm writes in Communium Rerum. This is another document by Pius X, Communium Rerum. St. Anselm is discussed as a scholastic who defended the teachings and rights of the church, often against other Catholics, quote-unquote Catholics. So what is interesting is that Pius X defended logic. He defended the use of reason. In other words, the scholastic method, right, which is a method for finding the truth using strict logical rules, a strict method, a strict system of finding the truth, right? And St. Anselm is one of the early scholastics who helped to develop this method, of course, which reached its peak and is most famous under the name of St. Thomas Aquinas. Now, Pius X was very much defending reason here, because he needed to defend reason, because otherwise we move into irrationality. You'll find that these modernists are irrational. Now, this doesn't mean they're stupid, but they are irrational. Interestingly, he jumps over Aquinas and goes to St. Anselm. St. Anselm was dealing with the same problem, I think in the 10th or 11th century, around there. St. Anselm was dealing with the same problem inside the Catholic Church. And the people within the Catholic Church, while there may not have been many of them, they were within the, shall we say, the mystical sect within the Catholic Church. And if I remember correctly, and I have to get back into that, I have to go and check my sources, but St. Anselm effectively said that these mystics are so disconnected from reality that they are heretics for all intents and purposes. They have lost all touch with reality, and they are to be fought, denied with authority, because these people have just completely lost touch with reality. Right, so this problem has been inside the Catholic Church for a long time already. Right, so then you've got another document he wrote, welcome century since, Praestantia Scripturae, on the Bible against the modernists. So he's got multiple of these documents that he has written. So look them up. Some of them are short. You can read them. They're comfortable, easy to read. And then he wrote the Oath Against Modernism. This was an oath that was actually said from 1910 onwards until 1963, or I think maybe as late as 1967. And this oath, priests and people who were involved in the church had to take this oath, and they had to swear that they were going to uphold the Catholic faith and the Christian faith against these modernist, communist ideas, these Gnostic ideas. And I think it was in 1967 it was finally abandoned, right, after Vatican II. He also wrote a thing called Notre Charge Apostolique, right, and he also wrote Lamentabili Sane, which condemns the 65 modernist propositions. We've already discussed that here, okay, the syllabus, right? Now, we have to look at scholasticism versus mysticism, because the early fight against what we would call modernism today was within the 10th or 11th centuries, around that time, and these were scholastics versus the mystics. This fight hasn't really gone away. So scholasticism and mysticism are not opposed to each other. They should go hand in hand. If theology is treated merely as an affair of the intellect and reason, it is devoid of all living and life-giving warmth. If it lacks clear and precise notions, if there is no method in its treatment, no logical classification, no definition, division, it will end in sentimentalism and heresy. And here, and that is Father John Lau, Church History, page 376. Now, I must mention here that this will take us directly to a heresy called nominalism. right? This touches directly on nominalism, which affects a number of, none of these things can always neatly be categorized, but nominalism affects a number of other heresies. You'll find it within atheism, you'll find it in materialism, you'll find it within materialist rationalism, and you'll certainly find it in a man called Martin Luther, which is another reason I absolutely despise Martin Luther, but we will talk about him at length. We will talk about the problems that he introduced and how he actually led the world into this woke nightmare that we're living today, that how he enabled that, right? So, but logical classification disappears. Science, biology literally disappears, because if you look at the idea of species, biology is dependent on logical classification of species. And if you have nominalist ideas, logical classification goes out the window. Biology disappears, species disappear, and then men can be women, and you know the rest. Pope Leo XIII on November 18, 1893, published Providentissimus Deus. This called for the defense and study of Scripture to promote the glory of God and the salvation of souls. That sounds incredibly pagan to me. He said that we need to study Scripture, promote the glory of God, and the salvation of souls. Yeah, that definitely sounds pagan. I've heard lots of non-Catholics say that Catholicism is pagan, and there's proof, because the Pope said that they have to read the Bible and promote God. Yeah, sounds okay. Moving on. It set forth the laws which govern the proper study of the Holy Bible. He warned against the false teachings of what is known as higher criticism, also known as the historical critical method. Now, this historical critical method was really gained ground in the 1800s, right? The 1800s, the 1900s, this period before the 20th century, saw the development of hundreds and hundreds of new heretical religions, new branches of heresy that were being developed, new private revelations. So this is the time of the Adventists, the Mormons, and so on. Understand, this was a very creative time, because the church came under severe assault by these scholars, these modernist scholars, preaching higher criticism. In other words, a new method of deconstructing the Bible. Right? So, and he says, which are commentaries of rationalism. Rationalism doesn't mean, in our sense, using reason. You've got to see this for the, shall we say, Gnostic/communist approach that it is. Right? Wherefore, we find it necessary to declare and to expressly prescribe, and by this our act, we do declare and decree that all are bound in conscience to submit to the decisions of the biblical commission relating to doctrine. Nor can all those escape the note of disobedience or temerity, and consequently of grave sin, who in speech or writing contradict such decisions. Now, this is the Pope writing here, right? This is the finding of the biblical commission. Konospiros, welcome from Montenegro. The Catholics are still under internal attack. Yes. Now, but I will do I've got some other content coming up in the next month where we'll be discussing all of this. We'll be laying this out and explaining these ideologies that flow from modernism or that flow into modernism. So notice, this is a warning for Catholics that when the biblical commission, when the magisterium has made a decision, has decided this is how we interpret this, right? This is not a matter for Catholics to apply private interpretation and say, well, I like half of that sentence that Pius XII said. I like that half of the sentence where he said you must have ice cream after church on Sundays. I like that part. But when he said that I have to go to gym and then I have to do treadmill for 30 minutes and I've got to do squats and knee bends and push-ups for 10 minutes, I don't like that. I'm going to skip that because I don't like that part of what the Pope said. I disagree with that. In my heart, I know that Jesus doesn't want me to. And in fact, I was listening to Father James and Father Nix, and they were saying that they also don't like knee bends. They prefer to do jumping jacks, but seated jumping jacks. Yeah. So yeah, Catholics don't have that choice. Do understand. Catholics don't have that choice. If you're one of those Catholics, and quite literally 95% of the Catholics in my comment section are those Catholics. I'll say this bluntly, the vast majority, okay, in my comment section are those Catholics. Well, besides, I know the Pope said we must have like vanilla, but I prefer chocolate, so I'm not gonna go with vanilla because I know chocolate's the devil's flavor, and the Pope said, but no, I don't think so. I'm going, So understand, you don't have that right. Pius, Gary, Pius the 10th never skips leg days. Dude. Yeah. Gary, yeah, that was excellent. Okay, so understand, when the magisterium speaks, Catholics don't have a pick and choose option, right? Okay, you do not have a pick and choose option. You can't say, well, I like page 5 of the Catechism, but I don't like page 7. It's not for me. And I like what Father Nix said. Father Nix on YouTube, he said some things that I prefer that. Father Nix is not the magisterium. Okay, so please understand, this binds Catholics. This is part of your belief. And Catholics who rebel, you are rebelling. You are part of the modernist problem. Please understand, according to what I've read, what I've learned, Catholics who smear the Pope, right? And understand that the Pope, whatever, let's not get into all the contentious issues, but when you smear the Pope, when you smear the magisterium, and you undermine and you smear the Catechism, you are part of the modernist problem. Okay, so notre charge apostolique. Pius X warned about the socialist, Marxist leanings of the Catholic L'Excellent movement of Marc Sagnier, founded in 1894. Thank you, Matthew Velasquez. And Mike Simard. Yeah. So, Ceylonists wanted to completely level social differences and to create a one-world church. Interesting. So by joining in unity with unbelievers, now, I do believe the Bible says that we are not to be yoked with unbelievers. If someone can find me that verse, right? We are not to be yoked with unbelievers. We're not to be yoked with unbelief. But they wanted to be yoked with unbelief by leveling all social differences. You can see immediately, this is socialist. This is Marxist. They aimed to address social inequalities and promote social justice. Not justice, but social justice. Understand, they are redefining the term. They're adding qualifiers into it, right? Social justice, cosmic justice, what used to be called cosmic justice at one time too. A Catholic view of social justice meant considering the needs of both the powerful and the poor. So within the Catholic Church, you have to have respect for the poor, but you also have to have respect for the wealthy. They have their money, so fine. We can't steal their money. Thou shalt not steal. I believe that's part of the Bible, right? So we have to respect their rights, as well as we have to cater for the poor where we can. So Celonists did not accept that authority comes from God down to the authorized leaders and from there to the people. So this is the Catholic view. I'm not going to get into this at length, but the Catholic Church has its own beliefs on this, right? That authority ultimately derives from God. God gives leadership authority, and this authority needs to pass down to the people, but there's a certain moral expectation, right? Yeah, social justice is not just and doesn't support human social cohesion. Exactly, it's this equity thing. It's basic, yeah, it's disruptive. We see it today. We know what's happening. So these socialists believed in immanentism, right? That authority arises from the people themselves. The authority comes from the people, by the people, for the people, in the communist fashion. Ask old Lenin about that. The ultimate source of authority is within the collective will, the collective. You see the socialist leanings of and consciousness of the people. So he writes something called Our Apostolic Mandate in 1910 to the French bishops, a letter. He stresses the duty to defend and promote Catholic teachings and principles in the face of modernist ideologies and secularism. So these people were trying to introduce communism into the church as well as a secularism, right? To make the church more of a social club, which was just, as opposed to having these strong moral foundations. It condemns the separation of church and state. Now, there's a very particular Catholic view on this as well in terms of separation of church and state. And in fact, even within the American Constitution, the belief that Americans have today, and that's another presentation that I have to do, but the American understanding, even within the law, even in the Supreme Court, was not that there was a separation of church and state and that no religion has prime of place in the country. That is not a belief that was held 100 years ago, 200 years ago. So the belief that Americans have today, that no religion shall have primacy, right, is false. At one point, Christianity was the prime religion, but no particular branch of Christianity was to be the prime one, was to dominate over others. America was a Christian nation, but I'll get into that another time. I'll do that presentation another time. So he condemns the separation of church and state, in other words, the separation of morality from the state, of Christian morality from the law. And he calls for the active engagement of Catholics in the public sphere to protect rights and interests of the church, which is interesting because you understand that the left, the political left, the Gnostics, the communists, organize very, very, shall we say, they're very well organized. They are incredibly sincere about what they are doing. So, right. Now, here he reaffirms the mission to spread the gospel and uphold the teachings of Christ. Okay, the first few slides obviously are going to be a lot of historical background that I need to set. I need to put down a lot of historical background and explain things, right? So put down the history of the time and the problems and so on. Okay, so he reaffirms the mission of the gospel of the church to spread the gospel. So the Catholic Church must spread the gospel. And for those who hate the Catholic Church, that's more proof that spreading the gospel is pagans. That's what pagans do. And uphold the teachings of Christ. More paganism right there. This is crazy. Am I reading that right? That the church must spread the gospel and uphold the teachings of Christ. That's obviously pagan, right? Am I wrong? Am I? So, because I keep getting told by non-Catholics that the Catholic Church is pagan and okay, whatever. So the importance of the apostolic nature of the church and bishops as successors of the apostles. So, in other words, you have a legacy. You have inherited a legacy from the apostles. You need to stick to that legacy. He warns Catholics to be vigilant and steadfast in their faith, resisting secular ideologies and working towards the establishment of a society based on Christian principles. He calls to action Catholics to actively participate in the mission of the Church, defending and promoting the teachings of the Catholic faith in the face of challenges posed by modernist society. Right? Yes, Villainous, very good point. Very good point. Doesn't allow the state to override the authority of the Church. That would be a dean. We have an example of how poorly that works, exactly. Now, do note, I want Catholics to note, and I see this again, this is 95% of the Catholics in the comments, right? Which is unfortunate. The Pope is an alien from the planet Zebulon. The Pope is a heretic. The Pope is wrong. The Pope is bad. The Pope is a communist. Check. The bishops are vicious. The bishops are that. The bishops are this. The bishops are wrong. The bishops are gay. Blah, blah, blah. You need to become a Catholic. Join the Catholic Church. It's awesome. You guys are not making a strong argument for joining the Catholic Church. Do you understand the problem here? By the definitions, as we'll see as we go through this, of Pope Pius X, you are the modernists. Deal with that. You are the problem in the church. If you're not directly a modernist, you're working for them, whether you know it or not. Right? So slandering the church, smearing the church, and then telling everyone, oh, the Catholics, we're awesome. It's like when you smear the Pope and then you smear the bishops, you're not exactly painting a good picture. You're telling everyone, run away from the Catholic Church. So please understand the hypocrisy, the problem that you're introducing. Zebulons from the planet Zetronix. Sorry, man. I got my planets wrong. Maybe they are referring to saints in Mary veneration. Yeah, well, they'll pick on anything. I've heard plenty of... Okay, so now we get to the oath against modernism. The oath against modernism was required by priests and other clergy in the early 20th century, affirming their adherence to traditional Catholic teachings and to reject modernist ideas. Pius X introduces it in response to the rise of modernism, right? And he called it a synthesis of all heresies. So the oath tries to preserve the faith, and he wants to keep the faith free from error, right? So, yeah, I don't want to make a joke about the planet. Yeah, so it's Connor, yeah, Spiros. I'm not going to make any jokes on that. And so he wants to make sure that those who devote themselves to furthering the interests of the church follow the dictates of the church faithfully, right? Follow the legacy, the inheritance, the deposit of faith, as they call it, of the church faithfully, right? So they would closely follow the guardian and interpreter of the truth whom Christ has appointed. So the oath emphasized the importance of preserving the faith and rejecting the errors and tendencies of modernism, which included a dislike for anything that was, shall we say, old, and an eagerness for novelties, the new, right? They wanted to try new things. Oh, that's old. That's from the 300s. That's old. We need new Christianity. We need to change Christianity. We need some modern ideas. We need to gay all the things. Do you understand? That's the kind of problem that we're dealing with. So, awesome possum studios here, but I'm also horrified by some of the things that are said by, shall we say, Protestants, right? Because I'm seeing lots of Protestant churches gaying all the things as well. And yeah, so the oath also affirmed adherence to apostolic and ecclesiastical traditions, right? They had to basically follow the rules of the church, follow the traditions of the church. And now, of course, the modernists want to undermine the authority of the church, Pope, and the bishops, right? They want to falsify its origin, its character, and rights. And this is exactly what I see actually is happening with lots of Protestants making up fancy stories, false stories about the history of the Catholic Church. So the oath against modernism was meant to protect the church from the modernists, right? And ensure Catholic teachings remains intact. So modernism arises in the 19th and 20th centuries, right? So we see these guys entering through the universities, right? Through sociology, through the arts, literature, and design. It goes against traditional norms and conventions, challenges the family, right? It goes against common morals, all of the things that we believe in socially, right? We see it today in the woke movement. Understand these two are very much aligned, often emphasizing innovation, experimentation, and breaking all of the rules. So, centuries since as the Vatican moved to the south of France for a century, we've gone badly wrong in the past, but the south of France, something weird happened in the south of France. Mal and I have been talking about that. Mal and I have identified issues in the south of France. But the south of France at one point became a center of heresy. This would be linked to the Gnostics, specifically the Manichaeans, or rather historically linked to the Manichaean Gnostics, to the cult of Mani. And then we'd have to look at the Albigensians and the Cathars. So there's going to be something there that we're still busy unpacking. We're working on that. Sandra, welcome. Better late than never. Right. So now, 16th century Protestantism breaks from the Catholic Church during the Reformation. It is characterized by a focus on individual interpretation of the Bible, right? This is private revelation. Of course, the Bible stands against private revelation, which is fine and all for you, but it has no binding on anyone else. Except this obviously now rejects the authority of the church. It rejects tradition. And I have shown before, and I will be showing again, how Martin Luther quite bluntly states, and I'll probably will do it in this series as well. Martin Luther quite bluntly tells his followers, I am going to interpret this gospel of St. Paul for you. And if anybody from Origen, Augustine, St. Irenaeus, no matter who it is, even if they are someone with greater authority than Origen and Augustine and Irenaeus and any church father. Now, when he says that, who's he implying? That's even the apostles. And he says, if anyone gives you a different opinion than I am going to give you here and now, you reject their opinions and you only follow me, Martin Luther. He writes this. I've shown this to you guys, and I'll be showing it to you again. It's in Martin Luther's works. I will be covering that, so this will be part of it as we go through. So Martin Luther bluntly says, I am correct. Everyone else who's not Martin Luther is wrong. Quite bluntly. Right? So very much individual interpretation, but he opens a can of worms that he can't close, and then he has to fight against that. And I'll talk about all of those things in the future. So they reject Catholic practices and the belief in salvation through faith alone and scripture alone, and they bring up all of that nonsense. All right? So modernism, in a religious context, right, emerges in shall we say, penetrates the Catholic Church, but it doesn't originate in the Catholic Church. Let's just say that, right? At least not in that period, right? It was a response to challenges posed by, so these modernists are responding to social, scientific, and philosophical developments of the time. It's very much like the Enlightenment, saying, well, no, we need to change Christianity. We need to extract what we can from Christianity as a social cohesive force in society, and we need to then modify it scientifically. We need to rebuild scientific Christianity. Socialism or scientific Christianity. Lots of the humanist movements were socialist, scientific Christianity, right? So this is what they're doing. They want to make changes to move with the times. Morality must change. Even, Darwin, of course, destroyed the concept of objective reality, and of course now he introduces it's okay to murder your neighbor. In fact, it's okay to murder whole nations because you're just cleaning up the dirty population. So I've covered that in my Darwin series at length. So again, it goes on about individual reason. Okay, my private revelations, my private interpretations. How can I be wrong? Because the Holy Spirit spoke to me. Okay, and as a theological movement, it emphasizes individual experience. In other words, subjectivity, adapting religious beliefs to contemporary ideas. Okay. So, that may be, JC, that's your personal experience. That's fine. That is that something that now characterizes the entire church? That may be, but then again, if you join the Satanist church, they're also going to be nice to you. I can guarantee it. They're going to be stunningly nice to you. If you join the church of the gay, they're going to be nice to you too. They'll give you cookies. So, okay, so modernist theologians sought to reconcile religious beliefs with advancements in science, history, and philosophy, and to reinterpret religious beliefs using modern philosophical ideas. In other words, communism, right? And also, what's old is new, what's new is old. These will be old pagan ideas from Greece. So they favor a symbolic interpretation of religious texts and doctrines. Symbolic. Notice, Evan Angel, welcome. Ariel, hi. Vending machine, welcome. So they favor a symbolic interpretation. In other words, when they say symbolic, the meaning is Gnostic. They'll give you a slice of fruitcake. So, they'll give you definitely a large slice of fruitcake. So, in other words, when they say symbolic, they mean Gnostic, right? So these are expressions of human consciousness and cultural context. In other words, it was okay in 7th century Arabia to shag the little ones, you know what I mean? But it's not okay today. But so, that's why the morality changed. That's what Muslims tell you. Well, that's exactly what they want to introduce into Christianity. And that's exactly what happened within the Protestant movement in the 1800s and 1900s. That's exactly what went in there, right? So, of course, though, except that Muhammad is the perfect example and he cannot do any wrong. Whatever he did is correct. So therefore, understand the contradiction to these Muslims? So let's see. Michelle, welcome. Now, these guys also, they advocate for social justice and inclusivity. Isn't that surprising? Where have we seen inclusivity? Inclusivity, man, have you guys heard of inclusivity? Seen any of that stuff? Well, it goes back a little while, and they finally have achieved the political and social power that they've wanted, right? They also want a more democratic approach to religious authority. Everyone is his own pope and own church. Martin Luther wrote those words, that every Christian is his own pope and own church, and well, today we have it. Okay, I'm my own gender. What's the difference between starting your own church, because you are your own pope and own church, and forming your own gender? Not a lot. Okay, not a great deal. Same concept, just different application. Mr. Rock says, funniest thing, it wasn't even the norm in Arabia. Muhammad said his own daughter's too young for marriage at age 12. Exactly. It's all hypocrisy. I mean, it's incoherent. It doesn't make any sense. It's all lies. It's all nonsense. Even back then, young marriage were not considered normal. Exactly. The pedophilia like that, no, that was considered just not right. Okay. Right, moving on. So the principal errors of modernism. Right. Denial of the existence of God. So these people deny the existence of God. Now, this doesn't mean they will admit to denying the existence of God, but that does make them atheists. Matthew Velasquez, thank you. All right, so be more inclusive, Lloyd. 7th century Arabians were freedom fighters. They were Palestinians, right? Weren't they? Yeah, most contemporaries knew child marriage was wrong. I know, it caused them great offense. Yeah, it caused them great discomfort. So that explains why Western churches are astray. They have interfaith events and much more, and they're totally unbiblical. Yeah, well, I mean, which Bible? First of all, which canon of the Bible? There's plenty of those to go around. Thank Martin Luther and John Calvin and their followers for that. So which canon? Because even if you adopt the Protestant canon, that canon still came from the Catholics, who chose which books went into the canon. So there's that canon confusion, right? Which the Protestants still have today. And then how do you interpret that Bible? Do you do it because the Holy Spirit told you? actually, hold on, the Holy Spirit's speaking to me now, and it says that everyone who disagrees with me is wrong. That I can feel it. It's the indwelling of the Spirit I'm getting this, I can feel the inner energy, and I can feel the Holy Spirit speak. Do you understand that nonsense? This is, I can claim that Mickey Mouse comics are holy because feelings, understand? This is the kind of nonsense that gets introduced, right? So you cannot make broad statements like that. What is your authority? What is your source of authority for that interpretation, right? What is your lineage back to the apostles? These are questions that you do need to answer. When you say, I believe in the Bible, it's like, which one? Pick one. Like, which one? Which canon? Like, and how do you interpret that, right? Because lots of people have followed the Bible and come up with utterly contradictory, incompatible religious ideas. So 1 + 1 is equal to 5, 1 + 1 is equal to 9, 1 + 1 is equal to 30, 1 + 1 is equal to 3, 1 + 1 is equal to 2.7. Which one is right? None of them. There can only be one right answer on some issues. Understand? So, I love your podcast. Thank you, Awesome Possum. It makes my question my own opinions and ask myself, am I a Pharisee? Am I a modernist? Am I a heretic? Am I Gnostic? Yeah, so let's continue. All right, so they deny the existence of God. They deny the importance of religious philosophy because it doesn't exist for them, right? Modernists hold an atheistic belief. They deny the existence of God and disregarding the significance. Oh, sorry, I duplicate typo. They disdain authority. They reject authority. It's like rejecting your parents. They also reject tradition, right? So when you break with tradition, understand, traditions are solutions to old social problems. When you reject the traditions, the problems come back. They also rely on a false conscience. This false conscience is a subjective conscience that is not aligned with the teachings of the church. So the church is your rock, your anchor, your pillar. That actually states that in the Bible, right? That the church is your pillar and your ground, right? The church is your rock. And you must be aligned also with the church, right? Because before there was a Bible, there was a church. You have a Bible because of the church. Jesus didn't leave a Bible. He wasn't a librarian, right? So when you go off on your own, then you are simply just making it up as you go along. That's your own private religion, which has no authority for anybody. And how do you know you're right? Mr. Rock says, I heard one Protestant pastor say, I believe everything Paul believed. Meanwhile, Paul died before the Bible was even written down completely. Yes. Matthias Alexander, welcome. Isn't that a Roger Scruton quote? Tradition are solutions to long-standing problems. It may be. All right, yeah. So now, they also believe in vital immanence. So they argue that religion originates from a sentiment, a feeling, right? A need for the divine within the life of man. In other words, you create a fake religion because you have this need, you see, because you're not satisfied by, atheism, right? So this faith creates fake religion. So, and because there is no external objective reality, because there's no external objective morals, therefore, whatever you decide is right. Therefore, you are right. And that is the nominalist view. Everybody is his own church, therefore everyone is right, which is relativist, which means no one is right, because how can you be right without an objective standard? So this feeling, these sentiments are the beginning of religion. It's not like there's a God and therefore we serve God, right? And try to discern what he wants from us. Rather, we have feelings and therefore we create God. Understand? These are two separate and contradictory philosophies. We are Western realists, we are Christian realists, whereas these people are nominalists. So, connection of faith and revelation to science and history, right? So modernists claim that faith and revelation are connected to scientific and historical phenomena. So they propose that religious sentiment is a form of revelation, that all religions are both natural and supernatural. Okay, so now you've got these broad, crazy definitions, right? So they advocate for religious consciousness to be considered equal to revelation and followed by the church. In other words, your personal revelations, your personal feelings must all be equal. All religions become equal. Now, you might say, but Lloyd, they have these, nominalism is defined. There's actually a dictionary definition. You're assuming you're dealing with Einstein, who's read the definition and is following it to the letter, because no, they don't. If it's private, if it's personal, then they can start making it up as they like to suit themselves. Understand? These guys are just making it up as they go. So there are broad categories you can put them in, but These guys are simply, they are anti-authoritarian, and they are going to be subjective in their views. They disregard dogmatic formulas, and they disrespect church teaching. So modernists disrespect and disregard the dogmatic formulas and sacred teachings of the church. They criticize and reject the importance of these teachings. Doctrine of experience and symbolism. Right, so Pius X says that their doctrines, right, based on personal subjective experience, in other words, feelings, sola fifis, and I feel like a unicorn today. I feel like I'm a little dog with fluffy, pointy ears, right? And the concept of symbolism, which is again Gnostic, leads to atheism and religious relativism. So the modernist belief in experience and symbolism opens the door for atheism, and we'll explain how we get there, right? And the idea that all religions are true because all feelings are true. Your feelings are true, right? Because it's your feelings. Well, except feelings are not true. Feelings simply are. You feel sad, you feel hungry. That's not a sign of truth. That's not a proposition. That is not an argument based on logic. It's just a feeling. It is, that's all. It just is. It doesn't make any particular truth claims. Understand? So feelings can't be true. You can't have your truth in that sense, right? You have your opinion, you have your perspective, but the truth, we believe there's an external objective truth. So they misrepresent, they misinterpret things to suit themselves, and then, of course, this leads to nothing but subjectivism and relativism. And once you believe that God doesn't exist, then, of course, if there's no God, if it's just your own personal feelings, then you're going to make it up your own self, and then boom, atheism. And of course, nihilism. So they argue that religious sentiment is the origin of all religion, including supernatural religion. So this is not exhaustive, okay, but you can find these areas of modernism in Pascendi Dominici Gregis. Okay, so Awesome Possum, look, you're going to have to first verify that these things are. I mean, so are you the authority that's going to make the claim or going to make the statement that, yeah, you know, as an authority on the Catholic Church, as the Pope over the Pope, I'm going to say that the Pope is, no, you're not. So that's something that you're going to have a look at. What is within the constitution of the Church? How do you deal with that? Can you prove that, right? Those are issues that are separate issues that you're going to have to deal with, but we're going to have to deal with that another time. That's outside of this topic. Right, so moral relativism. So let's look at a Catholic perspective on this, right? So the Catholic Church teaches that moral relativism holds that moral judgments are subjective, and they vary from person to person. It is considered by the Church to be a grave error and harmful to individuals and society. So, for instance, we believe thou shalt not murder, right? That's an objective moral truth that never changes in all times and in all places. Now you get to a guy called Charles Darwin, and he goes, murder, that's a great idea because you can take their stuff, and besides, they were Untermenschen anyway. If you get rid of them, you'll actually, that's like social hygiene, you know, it's like racial hygiene. You're actually cleaning out the junk, the garbage, just get rid of that, and, you know, the strong will survive, and it's all good stuff. Understand? That's your moral relativism. That was very much part of what Darwin taught. Right? So the Catholic Church teaches that there are objective moral norms that are valid for everyone. And of course, Martin Luther didn't teach that. But we'll talk about Martin Luther at length another time. So rejecting these objective criteria of morality and denying the existence of natural law are considered errors and considered destructive, corrosive to society. So the Church teaches that you have objective moral truths that you have to abide with, right? And to stray from that leads to moral relativism and to sin. It's an egregious error. Moral relativism can lead to a weakening of the sense of personal and collective sin. So now you get division in society. Well, there's nothing wrong with it, and everyone's right, so therefore I'm right, because of my personal subjective view, I'm right, and therefore I've done nothing wrong, and I can do what the heck I please. Understand this is a very slippery slope. No one's responsible. This leads to deterioration of ethics and an increase in relativism. So the Church says that we have to provide education that teaches critical thinking. And of course, Martin Luther called reason the devil's whore, right? He called reason Satan's bride, right? He said that we need to smear poop in reason's logic's face to make logic ugly. right? We must reject critical thinking. That's what Martin Luther taught. I've done this at length. I've gone through his quotes, his paper on it. I've done this. So the church, the Catholic Church, is saying, no, critical thinking is important. Martin Luther says, no, poop on that. Quite literally, he did. And encourages the development of mature moral values in order to counter the influence of moral relativism. Right, these are some sources down here. Okay, and the link, I'll actually, hold on, let me see if I can, okay, I won't be able to do that now, but I can drop that in the chat in a minute. Actually, let me drop that in the chat right now. Let me just go there. Yeah, so the full statement you'll be able to find here along with all the sources from the Catholic Church. Yes, exactly, vending machine. If you look at my stuff on atheism and socialism and the French Revolution, yeah, the atheism has been nothing but horrifically bloody. I mean, shockingly so. Now, the believer versus the philosopher. Right. In Pascendi Dominici Gregis, Pius X discusses the difference between what he calls believers and philosophers amongst the modernists, the leaders and the followers, in other words. Believers have religious, typo again, believers have religious feelings or sentiment. They have feelings. They need to be fed emotionally. So, they're followers. The link can't be found. Okay, so my bad. Sorry about that. Then they must have removed the comment. So I thought they would save it permanently. Not to worry. I have it saved. It's actually in the presentation. I actually have it saved here, so I can drop that in the chat later, okay? I'll just drop that in the chat later. Okay, so believers have a need, and the leaders have to supply that need, right? They have to, these weak followers, they need to supply them with things to believe, to control them and give them something to, believe in and hang on to, right? Now, believers have religious feelings, and these feelings are the basis of their religion. So it's an individualistic religion, a private religion, all right? Now, it's about their personal spirituality, my truth, my feelings, my fifis, right? And an emotional connection, that's very interesting, because at some point I have to talk about John Wesley, and I have to talk about the Puritans, and that's going to be interesting. That word emotional crops up. Welcome, Noarak, welcome. All right, so now modernist philosophers, the leaders, right? Lloyd, you think Luther was possessed? Some people did. There are people who actually do write, I believe, that when they met him, they thought he was possessed. I think what I've read of Luther, the things that I've read, look, I can't prove it right now, but I've seen indications from scholars that there are writings a lot of Luther's writings are not translated. It's still in Latin, of all things. A lot of it's in German. The Luther's works, which I have now in American English, are shorter than the ones in German, so clearly not everything was translated. And I am fairly sure that somewhere in academia, there are writings of Luther that are being withheld. I'm almost certain. It's just I'm fairly certain that there are writings of Luther that have been withheld, because if these were made public, it would cause incredible embarrassment to Protestantism, to Luther. And in the day of the internet, we're now seeing Islam is taking a beating, and by the same token, Martin Luther and the history of Protestantism is going to take a massive beating. And I am personally going to make an effort to give that man a beat down like he's never had before, because Luther was, as far as I can tell, a vile, disgusting, unchristian human being. Just absolutely filthy. I have no respect for him. I mean, he might have said 1 + 1 = 2 once, and he was right about that. But other than that, I wouldn't ignore just about everything else he says. Right? If he told me it was Tuesday, I'd have to get a second opinion, because, yeah. Okay. Was he possessed? Maybe by pride, right? Maybe by severe pride and stubbornness, but, yeah. So, modernist philosophers, now these are the leaders, right? They disregard authority. And they rely on their own personal conscience, their own personal feelings, their own personal judgment. They reject religious philosophy, and again, many of them just deny God, or they rewrite God in their own image, right? They remake God. They aim to reform the church by attacking its teachings, for instance, the divinity of Christ. We're going to see this within the Protestant movement, because the previous popes, just prior to Pius X, were seeing this within the Protestant church. Other philosophers tried to reconcile modern thought and scientific developments with religious beliefs in a way that would bring about a renewal, a change in the church. They would modernize the church. Don't forget, the Communist Manifesto was originally called the Communist Confession of Faith. It was a catechism, the Communist Catechism of Faith. Well, the Catholic Church has a Catechism of Faith as well. This is the Catechism of the Catholic Church. By the same token, even Martin Luther wrote catechisms of the Protestant faith, right, of the Lutheran faith. By the same token, Marx modeled his idea of communism on the Catholic Church, on the structure of the Catholic Church. So one can view this as humanism in an atheist sense, right? Though some of these people are believers, but in a scientific modern form of Christianity, which leads us back to socialism, right? This takes us right back to socialism. Right. So in the context of what we'd call the Gnostic Manichaean hearers and the elect, there are parallels with Pius's discussion of believers and philosophers amongst the modernists. So within the Manichaeans, and a lot of this nominalism we're going to trace back to the Manichaeans, it's going to go back to Mani. It's going to go back to these Gnostics, right? So to the cult of Mani. 99% of the people were hearers, right? And then 1% was the elect. So you've got the same kind of idea going on here, right? So hearers are the followers of the Gnostic teachings, but they've not yet reached a higher spiritual state. Sounds a little new agey. And they rely on faith and religious feelings to guide their beliefs and actions. The Holy Spirit, I have the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. Oh my God, I can just feel it. I can feel the energy. That nonsense, in other words, okay? There is no external guide. There's no external authority, right? They might want validation. Like, for instance, I glued some feathers to my cat, okay, and it's transitioning into a male goose, right? So, in other words, I'm now giving it what's called gender-affirming care, right? So you've got to give it, you've got to give it affirmation. So, yeah, they might get affirmation, but there's no guidance from an external authority. They reject external authority. It's their own personal feelings, because the Holy Spirit wouldn't lie to them, would it? So the elect attain a higher level of spiritual understanding and knowledge through intellectual exploration and reason, right? That's again personal revelation. So traditional modernists versus radical modernists. Now we're going to look at some contradiction or distinctions between the old and the new. Traditional modernists sought to reconcile some modern ideas with traditional religious teachings. So they're emphasizing the importance of faith alongside reason. So they aim to adapt religious doctrines to contemporary intellectual and cultural contexts. In other words, socialism. It's exactly what the socialists did. Socialism, humanism, atheism even. These are all religious ideas. They're religious systems. And they've adapted the Catholic ideas for their own purposes, right? Anglicans are very close to the Catholics in many ways, yes. Yeah, the high church Anglicanism is very close to the Catholic position, yeah. So they aim to adapt religious... Okay, so radical modernists are skeptical of religious traditions, and they try to reinterpret and reject things more significantly. So there's a range of these things, all right? Shane, welcome. So rationalist modernists versus mystical modernists. So now you've got the more rational and the more mystical. Again, it's a range. These are not two separate creatures, but they're just two sides of the same coin. So you've got those who talk about reason and science and philosophical analysis, right? And they want to integrate science and philosophy. This would lead us back to the humanists and the atheists of the Enlightenment. Mystical modernists emphasize the experience and the mystical dimensions of religion, right? Focusing on private, subjective, spiritual experiences, and so on. Then you have social and individualist modernists. I only follow Jesus. Okay? No church. No, I do my own thing. I just do I'm a little ant all on my own. I only follow the Bible. Which one? Okay? How? Right? So that's your individualist, right? Social modernists focused on social and political dimensions of religious belief. That's theocrats. They aim to address social issues. Yeah, now you're talking about Democrats. And they promote social justice within a religious framework. Eventually, the religious framework gets lost within the political. Individualist modernists emphasize personal autonomy, right? Individual experience and subjective interpretations of religious teachings. These should make sense to you. At least you should see that these are different approaches, but they all fall within the same modernist camp. Hakuna Matata, man. Jabril squeezed you 3 times. Then you can't be wrong if he squeezed you 3 times. Except he squeezed me 4 times. I got 1 extra, buddy, so I'm all right. So where are these modernist influences? So what are you guys taking away from this at the moment? What are you gaining from this? I know it may be somewhat dry, but we need to understand this is not just a theological movement. It is a political movement. It is a social movement, right? There's a lot of rationalist roots. Yeah, and we're going to be talking about rationalism as we go through this, correct? Gerardo Sea. So modernist influences are found in liberal Protestantism, okay? It's found in secular philosophy as well as certain intellectual movements like the Enlightenment, right? They drew on philosophers like Kant and Hegel. Hegel influenced Marx. Hegel was of the Hegelian dialectic fame. Of course, he was also he believed in, he was a Hermetic, right? So he believed in magic and gods, right? From Egypt, of course, right? And there are also these false theologians and biblical critics like Schleiermacher and von Harnack. We'll talk about them at length. I've spoken about them before as supposed theologians that didn't believe in God. Try to push Gnostic ideas like Marcionism, and yet they were claimed to be Protestant theologians and priests. They didn't believe in Jesus. They said Jesus is just a man, Jesus didn't exist, and yet they are Protestant theologians, respected Protestant theologians. Right? And of course, you got the evolutionary theories of Darwin and political movements in Europe that all shaped modernism. Right? France, England, Italy, and Germany were the main centers of the heresy. Now, you had Father Alfred Loisy, French professor, theologian, and an excommunicated priest. The Catholic Church threw his ass out the door. And you had Father George Tyrrell. He was an Irish Protestant convert, became a Jesuit, and he had his ass thrown out the door. They stated, these priests all stated, God cannot be known and proved to exist by natural reason. This is something that was decided long before by Aquinas and Anselm and others. External signs of revelations, miracles, and prophecies do not prove divine origin of the Christian religion. And of course, us modern humans, us really intelligent people, we don't believe in that nonsense, that superstitious stuff. That's superstition. They're talking like atheists, and these are priests. Christ did not found a church. And the essential structure of the church can change. Like, for instance, maybe they can endorse kiddie fiddling. You know what I'm saying? Because we like kiddie fiddling, and therefore we think the church needs to kind of accept that. You need to be tolerant. Men can be women, and maybe you need to bless. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so in other words, Christ didn't found a church. He did leave a Bible, though. He definitely left the King James Version, 11 copies. He left 11 copies of the King James Bible behind. And these are priests making these claims, Catholics and Protestants, okay? Church dogmas evolve over time so that they can change meaning from one thing to another. Now you've got moral, or blessing, exactly. Now you've got moral relativism. Faith is a blind religious feeling. Faith is not belief in things that faith is not rational. In other words, it's a feeling, it's a need, it's desperation, it's, you're weak, whatever, you need to feel something to feel good. It wells up from the subconscious. It's not a conscious thing. It's not something you choose. You don't choose to believe, right? Under the impulse of a heart, follow your heart, right? And a will trained to morality, not a real assent of the intellect to divine truth. So in other words, there's nothing intellectual, rational, conscious, or logical about faith. It's just simply, okay, you got these feelings. Well, here's 2 tablets and call me in the morning. That's the approach to that, okay? So, in other words, you cannot respond to faith rationally. You cannot have someone teach you about God, teach you about the Bible, teach you about Jesus, talk to you about the faith, and therefore you make a conscious choice to accept Christianity. They believe this is impossible. They believe that you just have a feeling one day and you create your own religion, and there you go, you're religious now. But yet they want you to accept their religious teachings while they believe that you cannot consciously accept external religious teaching. That is a contradiction, but this is normal for these people. Pedro, isn't that exactly what atheists say? Yes, because you'll find that these people talk exactly like atheists. So you're going to see a lot of that. Now, there was church infiltration in the 1900s. Hegel and later Marx spread throughout Protestantism, right? Through what was called the social gospel. So before the liberal, what was that? The movement in South America, liberal theology. Before that, there was the social gospel. So Hegel made his way, the little Hegelian, right? This guy who was dealing with his own sort of Gnostic, Hermetic view, and also Marx spread throughout Protestantism, not Catholicism. They made their way into the liberation theology, yeah. So before liberation theology, you had this social gospel, made its way into the Protestant church. Lenin synthesized the Soviet from Marxism and from the Eastern Orthodox Church. So he combined Eastern Orthodoxy with Marxism and created the Soviet. Marxism entered Catholicism through liberation theology. This originated in Latin America in the 60s and 70s. They were again trying to address social injustice, more social justice, right? And inequality, focusing on the marginalized and the poor. Who's going to think of the poor and the children? They emphasized the idea that the church must actively work towards liberating oppressed communities and achieve social and economic equality. In other words, fire all the white people, hire incompetent black people, and put them in charge of Harvard. Okay, that's exactly what we got, like in South Africa. Fire all the competent white people, put a lot of black people in charge, and reduce the economy by 50% in 15 years, and then blame the white people. Pretty much that's what we're dealing with here. So Marxist ideas, yeah, John Lennon, maybe John Lennon had something to do with it. Yes, does this sound familiar? Does this sound like something we were seeing today? This goes back to the 18 and 1900s, right? So in this context, Marxist ideas like critique of capitalist systems and the call for social revolution were integrated into Catholic teachings and practices. And they drew from Marx's socio-economic analysis and, of course, class struggle, right? The oppressor versus the oppressed, white people versus everyone else, right? While also incorporating Christian principles. So in other words, they just put a little cherry on the cake, a little Christian cherry on top. Understand? It's Christian. Jesus was a socialist, didn't you know? Right? And if you tell me that in the comments, I will ban you because no. So this fusion is an interpretation of Catholicism that combines faith and political activism. So in other words, it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's using a skin suit of Christianity to push a Marxist social agenda and political agenda, right? And of course, they focus on the poor and the marginalized. So this has been their strategy. Right. Liberation theology led to controversies and, of course, critiques within the Catholic Church. And the Church said this is incompatible with Catholic teachings. Pedro Jr., this is exactly what the BLM movement was pushing me towards. Wow. Amazing. Yeah, so yeah, they needed social workers, exactly. So dump charity and force equity, exactly. Communism, right? Yeah, so Bo Rudder says, would love to hear more about the connection between Eastern Orthodoxy and Leninism. It's not obvious to me. Yeah, I didn't look into that. That's just that's basically what I was learning. But yeah, I didn't go into depth at all. So that's something that's probably worth exploring in the future. Right? So Jesus was a socialist and Paul was a communist, Lloyd. Yeah, I know. So Protestantism. Now, Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was a German philosopher. He lived from 1770 to 1831. This guy has a significant influence on the development of Western philosophy and a negative influence, especially in the area of political and social thought. He influences Marx. Hegel's philosophy, right, this is a Protestant socialist theocracy. So the problem starts within Protestantism. It's recognized by the Catholic popes, and they're like, man, this stuff mustn't come into the church. And of course, it does get into the church, right? Because this thing just spread, right? So they found a nice entry into the Protestant church first. Hegel's philosophy, particularly his dialectical method, was adopted by Karl Marx. And Marx is known for his analysis of history and economics in terms of class struggle. Marx's ideas have never worked. They've failed everywhere. And of course, this was fundamental in developing communism. So the social gospel. This is a Protestant religious movement from the 19th century in the United States. It applied Christian ethics to social problems like poverty, inequality, and labor rights. Did you know that Christianity was designed to solve labor dispute issues? I didn't know that, but apparently so. So the social gospel was influenced by Hegel and Marx, right? and it tries to deal with the economic issues of the time. Basically, of course, the Bible isn't a manual for labor disputes, okay, and for arbitration of workplace issues. But this is, well, I'm speaking from the position of God, so therefore I'm right. So do what I say, damn it. Okay. So guys, am I going too fast? I won't go more than another 5 minutes. Has this been helpful? Has this been, I know this might be a tad dry, but it's a bit of a history lesson, I know, but I need to lay a lot of groundwork. We're at page 15 of 69 pages. So this is going to take 3 or 4 or 4 episodes probably. Mal couldn't be here today. He's feeling sick, but I'll meet with him again and we'll do another episode. So, but understand, we're going to tie this explicitly to what's happening today. So it might not, so we're going to have to explain a lot of things, put a lot of cards on the table. And we're going to have to explain, this is the history, this is the root, this is how it started, right? And then it morphs and changes. This thing adapts and changes. It's like the alien in, what's that Kurt Russell movie, in the Arctic? It's this thing can change shape. This is an alien that can change shape. It takes on ideas. It's kind of, it's got certain qualities to it that remain constant, but it's a chameleon. It's worse than a chameleon. What's that movie by Kurt Russell with the alien? So what you've got is these ideas, and I will be tying all of this together, and I'll be taking it straight into the 21st century where we are today, but I'll also take it back to the Reformation. We're going to see the same thing happen in the Reformation, and then it reoccurs 200 years later, it comes back in this period, and then it comes back again today. When we speak of a synthesis of all heresies, right, everyone says, there's a synthesis of all heresies, but the thing is, it's a synthesis of many heresies, and we've got to break down all of these heresies. So Pius X takes the time to talk about these different heresies. He says, look, here's one. He mentions communism, as I've mentioned. He specifically addresses socialism as one of the heresies. He also addresses Gnosticism as one of the heresies. He addresses rationalism as one of the heresies. So we've got to go through all of these and then say, look, these are the problems inherent in these things. And then you've got to see. So, for instance, you're not going to see one thing. You're going to see a blending, or almost a random blending of all of these. So you're going to have to learn to identify each one so you can identify the elements as you come across them within the corrupt theology that you find, within the corrupt social ideas that you find. Understand? So we have to go through all of these. You have to understand the history, how they functioned, what they did. Okay, so Andrew says, I've been reading a science fiction story from the point of view of the Thing. The Thing, yes, the Thing, the Kurt Russell's The Thing. Yeah, this idea, it's like the Thing, and showing us a socialist communist entity. That's amazing. That's actually really, thank you. Andrew, you make some very, very good points, very astute points. Yeah, very astute points. The Thing. Thanks, guys. Awesome Possum Studios as well. Yeah. So, okay, guys, another couple of minutes, and I'll call it a day, right? So you've got these prominent Protestant theologians like Walter Rauschenbusch, Washington Gladden, and Jane Addams. They're trying to address social issues through a combination of religious and political action. This also happened in the UK, by the way. Same process, right? And they started drawing on the ideas of Hegel and Marx to inform their approaches to social change. Now, if you've watched my stories on Marx, my narratives on Marx, my presentations on Marx, you will know that Marx says that he sold his soul to Satan. He wrote satanic poetry. He wrote a satanic play. His daughters both committed suicide in a suicide pact with their husbands. 2 of his baby children died because he neglected them through starvation and sickness, right? So understand, and Marx was very, very unhealthy, not just in terms of physicality, but in terms of not just his mental health, but his body. The man was covered in sores. The man he stank. He didn't clean himself. Marx was not a well man. And of course, I've seen lots of Catholics even tell me that, well, the fact that someone's a reprehensible bastard doesn't mean that their ideas are bad. Like, yeah, sure. Sure, buddy. Start cheering for Marx and Hitler and all those guys, and Darwin too while you're at it. Yeah. So, right? So you cannot be combining Marx with Christianity. That is just impossible. Vladimir Lenin, a key figure in Russian history, combined Marxist principles with elements of Russian orthodoxy to create the KGB Orthodox Church, which is still around today. And he creates a unique synthesis that would shape the Soviet Union. James says, I think it's a Gnostic force at the core. When I lost my faith and was looking into Gnosticism, it makes everything subjective. Yes, exactly. Pol Pot as well, Philip Schaffer says. So this fusion of ideologies can be seen in the way the Soviet state sought to control religious institutions while simultaneously promoting socialist values. You'll see it today in Putin's Russia as well. The complex interplay between Marxism and orthodoxy, of course, had a very long-lasting impact on the Soviet Union and the Russian people. Final slide, I'll stop here today. So we've got to look at individual, moral relativism, and nominalism. So the modernist movement was opposed by the conservative element in the church, right? They managed to suppress it and they condemned it in the early 20th century, right? Again, by Pius X in Pascendi Dominici Gregis. Now, he writes here in Pascendi Dominici Gregis, encyclical of Pope Pius X on the doctrines of the modernists, he says, right, we have to guard with greatest vigilance the deposit of the faith delivered to the saints. And he says here, and this is interesting, I've never seen a single Catholic commenter mention Malisic. Yeah, he's got the cold. Me too, for that matter, but he's worse than I am. Right, he states here, we must reject the profane novelties of words. Notice how you see atheists do it, but you see these modernists today do it, right? The woke, as we call them. They have a way with words. They'll twist words. They'll twist meanings, right? They'll redefine things. They have their own vocabulary, rejecting the profane novelties of words and oppositions of knowledge, falsely so called. I have mentioned this particular verse over and over in my discussions on Gnosticism. What is crazy is that the very first ideology that Pope Pius X alludes to in his attack on modernism is Gnosticism. This is from the Bible. It's Timothy, right? It's 1 Timothy, and it is an attack on Gnosticism. It warns the early church in the first century to be on guard against the Gnostics. And I've never seen a single, I've watched a lot of Catholic stuff on this, I've never seen a single Catholic commenter mention that the Pope specifically starts with warning against Gnosticism as the main thrust of the heresy of modernism. And I'm actually shocked that I haven't seen that, right? Yeah, words are violence and violence is words. Yeah, words are violence. So yeah, white silence is violence. So lack of words is violence, but words are violence. Like, makes sense. Please make it make sense. Do you understand? Okay. So now notice the very first heresy that Pius X calls out is Gnosticism. So that is the core, that is the root, that is the substance, Gnosticism, right? And he says here, these people are striving by arts entirely new and full of subtlety to destroy the church, right? And if they can, to overthrow utterly Christ's kingdom itself. These people are out to destroy the church because I was having a chat with someone earlier today. Any ideological war is at root a war for morality. It's a moral war, right? This, if you read books, if you read strategists who talk about ideological warfare, it's always a moral war. And the bulwark, the defense, the fortress against this corruption is the church. It is the teachings of the church. The church has to spread good morals, and therefore they have to undermine and destroy the church. Understand? So you can say the Bible, but then, yeah, 5 people read the Bible and they have 5 utterly contradictory and incompatible religious ideas. So yeah, that's not good enough. You need to have, what is your tradition? That's the church. Bang, there you go. That's your teaching authority, right? They have to undermine the church. And when someone says demoralize, we believe that this means to be depressed. I'm a little demoralized today. You know, my favorite football team didn't win and I feel, no. To demoralize is effectively a KGB term, if you will. It is to rip out your morals and replace them with fake new ones. Strip out your morals, change your fundamental core foundational values, and replace it with the woke values that they want you to have. So they say here, this is in the ranks of the priesthood itself, who, pretending to love the church, lack the firm protection of philosophy and theology. Yes, Yuri Bezmenov, exactly. So in other words, these people are bad philosophers, they follow bad philosophy, and they've got bad theology. And they are imbued with poisonous doctrines taught by the enemies of the church and lost to all sense of modesty. They vaunt themselves as reformers of the church. You're seeing this happening today. And they form more boldly into a line of attack, and they attack all that is most sacred, not sparing even the person of Christ, whom, with sacrileges, they reduce to a simple, mere man. So this certainly happened, okay? And as we go forward, we'll talk about how this started within the Protestant movement first. Yeah, once shaved, always shaved, because I shaved this morning and I don't ever have to shave again. Never have to shave again. Once you shave, never need to shave again. Right, so let's finish this page and I will call it a night, and tomorrow I've got a different talk. So he discusses the rise of modernism, which denies the existence of God and religious philosophy. So think, why would they attack religious philosophy? Because they are bad philosophies and they are good philosophies, and you need to know the good philosophy. For some reason, that made me think about the book 1984 by Orwell. Good point. Yeah, well said there, Kitsune. It highlights the presence of individuals within the Catholic Church who hold these beliefs and want to reform the Church by attacking sacred teachings. This is not just a Catholic Church problem. Pius X describes the modernists, their efforts to wage an unrelenting war against, and he mentions this a lot. He speaks of it often in his documents, scholastic philosophy. I did an entire series called Theological on Scholasticism, which is the rational, logical method of finding truth, right? Martin Luther and the Protestant founders, they all had their own method of scholasticism, which was not a method of finding truth. It was a method of arguing, exactly like how Muslims argue against you when you bring them truth and facts. They have this baffle you with bullshit method. Martin Luther and Calvin and others developed a very similar system, believe it or not, which was not designed to find truth, but meant to redefine things in their favor, meant to dispute. It was a form of disputation, a form of arguing to undermine. In other words, a method of sophistry, telling lies in a nice way. That's really what it was. It was the Catholic Church developed our thinking tradition, the Western rational tradition, based on Aristotelian logic and, of course, Thomas Aquinas' work. So he says we must defend logic. We cannot lose touch with logic, scholastic philosophy, and theology. They mock and diminish the force of tradition. In other words, the tradition handed out by the church, the tradition carried on from the first centuries of the church through the apostles to the early church fathers and forward. And they falsify the character of the magisterium. That's the Pope and the bishops who are in communion with him, who retain the traditions. Modernism, as a movement, attacks traditional Catholic teachings and authority, and they emphasize agnosticism. Now, this is an agnosticism about moral good, meaning that moral good is not an objective thing. There's no objective truth. There's no objective good. Maybe in the 7th century, baby fiddling was fine. Ask Mo, he knows, right? Now, today, it's not okay because, well, we've modernized and, we're a modern world, but back then it was perfectly morally acceptable. In other words, nonsense, right? Moral relativism. So these people are agnostic. They don't care about objectivity, right? They don't like natural theology, and they have disdain for scholastic philosophy. In other words, logic. They reject logic and objectivity. And this undermines critical thinking, this undermines logic, and therefore both of those undermine truth. You cannot have truth if you have no objectivity and you've got no logic, right? Modernists criticize Catholic doctrinal authority. They want to minimize the power and falsify the character of tradition. In other words, you lie about the history of the Catholic Church. This is something that is really common. And again, I'm going to have to blame a certain German theologian for that, because he went out of his way to write a bunch of lies. A guy called Martin Luther, may have heard of him. He went out of his way to write every possible lie, simply to smear and destroy the Catholic Church, right? So he was happy to use false historical narratives, and this continued under Calvin and so on. And their ideas of the church, the sacraments, the scriptures and dogmas are a serious threat to the integrity, of course, according to Pius, to the Catholic faith. But you'll find that you have the law of unintended consequences. These ideas have wider impact on the whole church, and they will undermine the entire Christendom as a result. And I'll stop there. So next week, or in this week, I'll continue. We'll talk about the war against reason. So, right, the Holy Bible is not the final authority. Who interprets the Bible? The textbook is not the final authority. The teacher is. Who interprets, right, the textbook? How do you apply it? Because not everything is clear. It's not a wiring diagram that's cut and dried. What's my opinion on sedevacantism? Not much. I mean, I'm not Catholic, so I don't know. But I've seen some of the arguments made by sedevacantists, and I don't know, don't convince me. Do you debate? Would you publicly debate Anthony Rogers or James White on Protestantism? I mean, debates are contests. I don't think that people learn anything from them when one can have discussions. Because look, I spend hours researching, and I write these things down because I can't remember this. I'm not a biblical scholar. So I write stuff down, I type them up, I research them, I take notes. I have notes you saw earlier that I put extensive notes and citations in my PowerPoint slides because I can't remember this stuff, right? So basically, these are things that I can refer back to, and I cross-reference. So I look at things and I cross-reference and I go, okay, so, right, see, so here, for instance, I've got additional notes here. The moral and social implications of having agnosticism about moral good, right? What are the implications of that, right? You lose moral, okay? So you have moral relativism, right? Everyone becomes his own boss, his own king, his own pope, right? That's individual autonomy. You have ethics and decision-making, so everyone decides what's right for them, right? You lose social cohesion, and there's no ethical responsibility. There's no common standard, therefore no one's responsible. So everyone just shrugs their shoulders and the things go on. Understand? No one, there's nowhere where the buck stops. There's no president of the church, and that's a problem. So I take notes, right? And basically I work with notes. So, I mean, would I talk with them? I mean, if there's value in it, I mean, we'd like to just see their answers. I can pose questions and then see what their answers are, right? Because what I'm seeing is that with the advent of the internet and access to AI and access to new sources, we're able to learn things that weren't available 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I can take 5 or 6 massive textbooks, drop them into an AI, and tell the AI, index all of these books, and then start querying that thing and start getting answers out. Understand? So then now we can see a different picture of Luther. We get the story that we've been told about Martin Luther, I think, is completely false, right? They put lipstick on that pig, and they made that pig look like Madonna. Right, so it's that simple. Okay, so yeah, where are we? We answer the last couple of questions and call it a night. Gnostics believe that this world is an illusion. No, they believe this world is evil as well. Don't forget. How can you get truth from an illusion? With that method, yeah, you can ignore fact and 2 + 2 = 5. Exactly, good point, James. Yeah, sedevacantism seems to be divisive. I agree, Valenus. It looks like another modernist ploy to undermine the Catholic Church. This sounds like the criticism a lot of the traditional Catholics levy at Vatican II and what happened after, even if it was not directly this. Yeah, there is an issue with the language. I will admit there's a certain vagueness about the language. You're not a scholar, Lloyd. Could have fooled me with all the clear information and references you provide. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, look, I just take the time to read, present the sources. I mean, I can link all my sources, but you guys have seen the names of all the things, and I'm just summarizing what there is. Sounds like chaos, yes, and then isn't sedevacantism anti-modernism by definition? No, it's a return to Protestantism in a sense. I don't know, I think it just causes confusion. It's just throwing a hand grenade in the room. And yeah, so will you tell us what you are? Everyone asks me, man, how many hundreds of times? I was raised Anglican, sorry. Everyone asks, and people are putting it in the comments, I'm Anglican. Like how many times do you want people to put it in the comments? I was raised Anglican my whole life, right? So, I mean, seriously, have I seen Madonna lately? Yeah, Matthias, I've seen Madonna lately, and that's Martin Luther right there. So guys, thank you. I'll call it a night here. Hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully this has been enlightening for you. This history is important, okay? Remember, if you don't know your history, you're condemned to repeat it, right? And yeah, so on page 17 of 69, hopefully I will be on with Mal in a few days. Tomorrow I'll be online again. We're going to be talking about how Gnosticism influenced totalitarianism, how totalitarianism is Gnosticism is woke. So I get asked that question every 3 minutes. Lloyd, what religion are you? I'm an agnostic, dyslexic, insomniac. In other words, I lie awake at night wondering if there really is a dog. Okay? And then, yeah, so new channel title, Lloyd Anglican. Now, I think I've walked away from the Anglican Church. It's, yeah. So, and yeah, guys, so I walked away from the Anglican Church because I think they've gone off the rails, and now I sleep like a baby. In other words, I wake up every 2 hours and I cry. Okay, guys, so good night, God bless, and I'll see you guys in a few days. And see you tomorrow night.